All right, good evening. Another Monday. Welcome to the Aftermath. I'll be your host tonight again, as always. Saul G, coming at you live from Atlanta, Georgia. Joining me tonight, I apologize for my voice. I'm not under the weather, but I'm just kind of tired tonight. Had a long day at work yesterday. But anywho, we still gonna come to you with pretty much everything, all the latest news, the latest, basically everything that's going on right now that I think needs to be discussed. I'm joined this night to always by the average to my Bruce Wayne, BJ from Tennessee. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, you can tell, man. I'm tired, man. My voice is tired. It probably sounds that way because I have a voice that I really don't like, but it's gonna sound a lot different tonight. But it is what it is. Um,
Yeah, I get that.
not,
I'm tired too.
yeah. Nah, I'm not gonna even go there because I was gonna say something that somebody said about unemployment and having two jobs, but I'm not gonna even take no cheap shots like that right now. So I'm just gonna keep it. I'm gonna keep it on the level tonight. So I made this picture right here, right, and the visual that I wanted from this picture was to basically ask a question, to ask if you're biased, depending. And I think when you look at the different side by sides, it was supposed to be the person, basically directly next to them is supposed to basically say, do you feel like you have a certain bias against one versus the other, right? Um, I think we can start just basically going through the people in there. Of course, if you don't know who these people are, I'll just kind of go through briefly because I'm going to kind of go into each one and kind of expand upon that. But just after you get this, just go ahead and get that CNN video ready where it's Van Jones and it's the other two people talking about the Jussie Smollett thing. So this kind of had that. That's going to be the first video we talk about after I kind of go through this. But if you look at this picture, okay, you got President Trump next to President Clinton, I think for obvious reasons. Right below it, you have Robert Downey Jr. in Tropic Thunder. And then next to him, you have Sarah Silverman. The next picture would be Ben Roethlisberger. Next to him, of course, Kobe Bryant. If you go down to the next level, that would be former Senator Robert Byrd and former Congressman David Duke. Next, a man who's, he's famous anyway, but he's been in the news lately. You have R. Kelly, and next to R. Kelly, you have Michael Jackson. So there were plenty of people that I wanted to put in there, but first of all, it only lets you put a certain one. I think this is a good start, just to kind of explain how I think that as a society we're automatically going to be biased in some way, form, whether it's race related. Nowadays, it's extremely like partisan. You understand what I'm saying? One person can basically get away with something, but another person can't, based on which side of the aisle the person falls on. So I'm going to start it out. So I just want you to kind of just take and look at this, basically look at this picture and kind of get an idea about what we're going to talk about because we're going to come back to it at multiple times. So what I want you to do, you can go ahead and stop sharing that. And I want you to bring up the video because I think this video is number one, a part of a lot of what's going on when people speak about the divide in the country or just the general political climate that we have right now. And then second, she is the hold on. Yeah, go ahead. I was gonna say I only heard the audio. I didn't see what we were supposed to be doing. But oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. Let me see. Okay, here we go.
We're gonna play it.
Right. Yeah. So you can go ahead and play it. So, and then I'll tell you kind of stop, and we're gonna kind of go through it, kind of section by section. But go ahead.
co-founder and managing editor of The Beat DC. We also have Nichelle Turner. She hosts Entertainment Tonight, and Van Jones, host of CNN's The Van Jones Show. Tiffany, I just want to start with you because I feel like the pendulum has now swung back the other way so far. So 3 weeks ago, I think people were wrong to believe Jussie Smollett in such a wholesale way, to dismiss any skepticism that they had about this story and jump on the bandwagon and believe him and so publicly be on his side. And now, are we making the same mistake of believing the police chief in such a wholesale way? Jussie Smollett hasn't been convicted yet. He hasn't gone to trial. And now to say that, yes, he's guilty of this, the way everybody say, I've never seen anything like it, this kind of rush to judgment in such a short period of time.
Okay, stop. Okay, well, first of all, I think that's an obvious point that I'm about to make right here. But she said she's never seen such an obvious rush to judgment. Okay, you've never seen such an obvious rush to judgment based on, let's just say, based on just an initial accusation. I think we can look at the entire Russia investigation or the Mueller investigation, because from the beginning, or at least for the last 2 years, the president has been guilty of Russian collusion since the very beginning, right? But of course, this goes back to that bias that we speak on. She doesn't see it, and she says she's never seen, even though like on the show every day, that's all they talk about is the Russian investigation, the Russia probe, how it could be coming to an end, and all these other different things that are in there as well. But I think that is a good way to start out the show. Now, this young lady, Tiffany Cross, I really kind of want you to focus in on to what she's saying, because ironically, in this segment, she is what represents the bias that is a huge problem, like I said, in the country. So go ahead and let's listen to what she had to say. You can start it again.
Story is getting a little bit too much attention. I know that it's, has all the elements of television and clickbait and things that we love, but I feel like, there was a member of the United States government who had a stockpile of weapons that was ready to attack, some of our colleagues and people we know and people on Capitol Hill. And here we are talking about Jussie Smollett. I know there were a lot of people who thought the story sounded strange when it first happened, despite all this, public declarations of support. And people are asking politicians about it. And it feels a little bit misguided at this point that it has all of our attention. I think, it almost feels like this pendulum to swing, like, oh, we're so sorry, MAGA supporters, that, we falsely identified these people. And, there are a lot of evidence of violent incidents that happen at these MAGA rallies. And I just don't want to have Jussie Smollett distract from that. I mean, a few weeks ago, a cameraman was attacked at a BBC rally sport in 2016. Remember the older white gentleman punched the young black kid who was there protesting. They had to call off a MAGA rally in Chicago. And so when we have all of this attention on Jussie Smollett, it almost feels like there's this effort to extend this mea culpa to people who are in fact saying very deplorable and ugly things at these rallies.
I mean, I hear you. This because when it
becomes majority,
political,
maybe not all the majority.
With MAGA, I don't know about that. I mean, I just don't know. I think that President Trump, when he tweets, Jussie Smollett, what about MAGA and the tens of millions of people you insulted with your racist and dangerous comments? It was too broad of a brush stroke to denigrate all MAGA supporters.
I don't know. I mean, I've seen a lot of what happens at these MAGA rallies. I don't know if you've seen some of the signs and comments that they say. I think, look, the Jussie Smollett thing has a lot of holes in that story, for sure. I don't think this is the opportunity or the time for everybody to say, oh my gosh, so sorry, you guys. Who would ever think that of the MAGA crowd? Like, there's reason. There's where there's smoke, there's fire. There was smoke there at these things. So I'm not giving him a pass. I'm just saying there's a reason why people were willing to believe it.
Van, go ahead. Well, I think I see it slightly differently in that the one thing you want if you are going to have a justice movement that is credible is not to lump everyone in the same category and say, well, your whole category, your whole class is suspect. So therefore,
all right, stop it right there.
It's not true.
I do got something to say though. Like,
go ahead.
I saw D.L. Hughley say the same thing. Like, oh, I don't know why Trump is talking about this. Should he be talking about that person who was caught? The thing about that is that person was caught. That doesn't happen. That person was stopped from doing whatever he was about to do. and this is still ongoing. So I don't get why people keep wanting to try to change the subject.
Well, there's a couple of reasons why they want to change the subject. Number one, of course, they want to change the subject because it's what a lot of people have been talking about, right? It's the discussions that we were talking about how things are labeled, right? Everybody now is concerning themselves. Why is the president not talking about the shooter or whatever the case may be, right? These are the things that we want to concern ourselves with, but it's a situation where you don't care what the president says, right? You don't care what the president says 99% of the time, but then when he doesn't say something, the attack is, oh, he didn't say anything. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like you can't have it both ways. And trust me, if the names on this list was Mitch McConnell, what's my man, Lindsey Graham, and a whole bunch of Republicans, it would, the same way this Jussie Smollett thing wouldn't have been a story if it wasn't MAGA people involved, if it wasn't Democratic presidential candidates on the list, I don't think it would have been a story as well. And that's a part of what I'm trying to bring out tonight. The reason why either one of these are a story, and the reason why she deflected in what she was talking about, because she basically said, well, I mean, yeah, everybody wants to talk about this one. Bottom line is, everybody wants to make a big deal out of a hate crime, right? That's basically what she said, if it's true, right? Oh, everybody wants to make a big deal about a hate crime, but let's, something that actually happened where a man was physically assaulted. Because if she's under the impression that the Jussie Smollett thing is true, right? Then she's basically saying, oh, what's the big deal about Trump supporters beating up a black gay man in the middle of Chicago? What we really need to be talking about is there was this white guy with all these guns who's obviously a Trump supporter who was going to kill people, who was going to try to hurt people, but he was caught and captured before anything ever happened. So she's basically already came out and said that in her mind, an actual attack is not a story, but a potential attack is a bigger story. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of just saying Jussie was wrong, the guy, of course, in Maryland was wrong as well, but it's like now it's not getting the attention you want. And the reason why that story is not getting the attention you want, when it's gotten to me, we know about the story. I feel like once you have someone in custody, right? Like go back to the Vegas shooter. The Vegas shooter, of course, got plenty of attention. Why? Because an actual attack. Go back to Sandy Hook. Got plenty of the Pulse nightclub shooting. Anytime Stone, is it not Stonewall? Stone, is it Stone? The high school in Florida, something Douglas, got a lot of attention. Let me tell you why. Because an actual attack was actually carried out.
Exactly.
So I think we need to go to what actually happens versus what could potentially happen. And yeah, it's something nice to go on, but that's almost like saying right now we have military operations going on in the Middle East, and you would assume those military actions are in some way deterring potential terror attacks from not happening in our country, right? The war on terror, we assume, stops terror attacks. If a terror attack actually happened, of course that's going to get, as it should, get more media attention than the possible, I guess, where one is actually like kind of sort of is stopped from happening. And I think what she's saying is very dangerous because I'm actually going to agree with Van Jones right here, which is odd and rare. But if you listen to what he says, this is what we get into a lot, right? I can come and say, even though the Jussie Smollett story might not be real, we do understand the violence happens at the rallies. We do understand all these other different factors, right? We understand these things. So because we understand the different factors that are at play, I can basically, like he said, I can say your whole crew is suspect. So this is that dangerous territory that I don't like to get into, because as a black man, right, you can open yourself up to a whole bunch of things because, as Van Jones said, because your crowd is suspect. For example, you know, you're dating a young lady, right? And she comes up to you and you're talking to her, XYZ, blah, blah. And she says, oh, you know, no, I don't think I could ever be serious with you because, you know, black men don't take care of their children, right? We know black men, you cheat. You're known for being cheaters and all these other things. And they're basically saying because, quote unquote, the black men crowd is suspect, it can now be applied to everybody in that category. And there's no need to apologize for it, right? Because basically what she just said, the whole MAGA crowd is suspect. You can look at the rally and say, if two people at a MAGA rally get into a fight, does that mean the entire 10,000 people are suspect? And this is what I feel like black people have been saying for a long time. Why do you call us all criminals? It's such a small percentage, right? If you look at the amount of crimes and you look at the amount of criminals, the overwhelming majority of black people are not criminals. There's no, if you believe, and this is what I always tell people, if you believe that over 50% of black people are criminals, which means the population is 34 million, right? You're telling me you believe that somewhere between 17 and 20 million black people are criminals, then that just goes in and tells me, number one, you're not educated. You don't know anything about statistics. And that's the reason why, like I said, the way she is talking, the way she is framing this is a very dangerous way to do it, because anybody can take any aspect of you from being your race, your gender, your job, anything that you do, they can just basically say, well, your crowd is suspect, so I don't have to apologize for basically like even the lady who I never agree with on CNN saying, I think you're, and it's kind of funny hearing her saying, I think you're painting the MAGA crowd with a broad brush, right? And she basically said, oh, well, why do you think that we should have to apologize now? Because their actions tell us that it's okay to do this, right? So I think that's the part of this that, like I said, I'll go into, but I'm gonna let Van Jones finish. And then once again, I wanna hear her response to it, and then we're gonna go into something else, but go ahead.
It's not that big a deal because your whole class is suspect. That's what they do to black people. And I don't believe that. I have huge criticisms and problems with this rise of hatred in the country. I think the president too often aids and abets that by things he says and does not say. And that's a big problem. That is a separate matter from any individual incident and any individual person who's being accused or who's making an accusation. We have to be able to separate those things. It is in fact the case that liberals and progressives, like myself, called attention to this when we thought that it was the MAGA crowd. We put up videos, we tweeted, we talked about it. So we can't now say it's not a story when it turns out that it's almost certainly to be a hoax. And so, you got to eat the whole hamburger when stuff like this happens. And I think everybody needs to take a step back. What I want to say about where we are now is, yes, I said yesterday, let's not just ride this pendulum back and forth and back and forth. There seems to be overwhelming evidence that what Jussie said is not true. The police have made their case. We still have not heard publicly yet from Jussie Smollett. I want to hear from him. I want us to move forward. But I do think to the extent that it is a story, it's not like liberals and progressives says, it's not that big a deal. Everybody be quiet. We don't want any attention on this. We said it's a story. And I think if it's a story when it's on one side, it's got to be a story on the other too.
Can I just say though really quickly, Van, because it almost sounds like you're comparing the plight of MAGA people to black people, and I don't think that's necessarily.
No, that's not what I said at all.
Well, you said this is what they do to black people, and I think that's a bit of a false equivalency.
Listen, here's what I'm trying to say, and we're in a world now where people want to jump on any one thing and whatever. We don't have to be in these camps. I think that you're somebody who believes in justice. And I don't think you're somebody who believes in justice only for one group. I think you're somebody, I've read your stuff. You believe in justice, period. And when you're talking about justice, period, there's a standard.
Look at her face. Like, she just looks like, she looks pissed. Like, look at her face.
Look at facts and evidence. And what I'm saying is we hate it when people don't give us that benefit. So it makes, I think, African Americans especially sensitive to these questions of justice. And I think we should extend that to everybody. And then when we do that, 99 times out of 100, we come out on top. So I'm not advancing any standard that's bad for Black people. The standard I'm advancing is great for Black people because 99 times out of 100, we come out on top, but maybe not this time.
There's been a lot of talk, obviously, about the long-term impact of this.
All right, you can stop it right there because I think the woman on the bottom left corner, I think you can stop sharing. Excuse me. I think she represents a lot of, I'm not going to say a lot of what's wrong in the country, but I believe that mentality, right? Because once again, she wants to put everybody in a box. Everybody who, like she said, the entire MAGA crowd is suspect. And she's saying their actions in every single thing. Now, once again, it goes to defending, right? You want to go back and defend. Because remember, a lot of times, and it's sad that we're doing this now, but even remember when the Vegas shooter happened, remember when the attack happened at the high school, and even the one in the Pulse nightclub, the one where the softball game shooting. If you look at a lot of these shootings, now the first thing that we're going to is we're trying to get political information about it. Oh, who does this guy support? You understand what I'm saying? Let's look at some of the different aspects of this instead of it just being, this is a tragedy, right? It's a tragedy. Like, I don't care that a lot of the people out of the Stoneman Douglas shootings, like apparently they a lot of the people who are getting a lot of attention, they all seem to be extremely far left, right? Like the I forget the one Hispanic girl who has kind of like the shaved head, and I forget the little the white dude's name. David, was it David something? I forget his name. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I just don't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, I'm glad I'm kind of forgetting his name. But yeah, David, the one who was going around talking about, he had the little one where he was cursing. But anyway, we are already going, and now we have less sympathy for him because we don't agree with their brand of politics, right? So when you say something like this, I can basically say anything I want about you and about who you technically associate yourself with, just based on, like I said, a very small number of people who do things. Because like I said, I mean, I'll never defend, I don't really care, if you got a hat on, if you're a Trump supporter, if you're a Republican, if you're a Democrat, if you're a liberal. I try my hardest to make sure that I kind of go, of course, it's almost like being home team, but I still make sure that I criticize, both sides, because if you don't, then that runs into that bias. So I remember on the photo, number one, go ahead and pull up the Bill Clinton accusers tape. I believe that's with Sean Hannity. So I want you to go ahead and get that ready. But a lot of people, especially conservatives, they label Bill Clinton as a rapist, okay? And I think that is problematic. Let me tell you why. Because Bill Clinton has never been accused of anything. But on the other hand, some people who label Bill Cosby a rapist when he has been, basically, he's basically, went to court and he's been found guilty. They will defend Bill Cosby and say, well, Bill Cosby, I still think he's innocent. He's not a rapist, XYZ, blah, blah, blah. So we have these internal biases that I think that we're fighting all the time. Because think about this. This is what's going on right now in the Jussie Smollett case. You can go ahead, like I can slide it from Trump down to Jussie Smollett. And this is how it works, right? Just take a second back while we watch. I'll tell you when it started in a second. But if you think about kind of sort of how this sliding scale works, think about this. With Trump, a lot of people didn't like Trump. So Trump has already been called. I was watching, I think it was CNN the other day, and they had a segment basically saying, is Trump a Russian plant, right? Like, it's almost like the show, The Americans, where they sent these Russian spies over here. They basically just embedded themselves in American life. So apparently the president of the United States is apparently just a Russian spy based on some of these, segments and things happen. And it's very believable, right? To say, you believe Trump colluded with the Russians. He hasn't been convicted of anything. Yes, he's been under investigation. You can talk about whatever evidence you feel points to him actually doing something, but to me, it's not as cut and dry as the Jussie Smollett thing. There is no videotape coming out with him, with any type of incriminating actions. There is no audio that we have of him talking to Vladimir Putin somehow in English that I think everybody would love to have. If there was some sort of video where Trump was talking to someone before the election, basically talking about this, but you already make him guilty. And then when he comes against the FBI or the people doing the Robert Mueller, the response is what? Oh, he doesn't believe, he's basically done a poor job of, basically discrediting the intelligence community. He doesn't respect law enforcement because he doesn't believe what the FBI is telling us, right? He says it's a hoax. He says it's a waste of time. Meanwhile, you slide that scale over to Jussie Smollett, right? And people say, you know what? Chicago PD is kind of suspect. I'm going to back up a little bit. And then you take another step back and they say, well, you know what? He hasn't been convicted of anything. So I might have think he did it, but you know what? I'm going to reserve judgment until everything is already played out. Slide the scale over one more. Bill Cosby. Yeah, but I just believe they was trying to take Bill down. So you know how the justice system is biased against Black people, right? You'll end up in that category. So even though he was convicted, I still believe he was innocent. So you slid the scale all the way across where you said, okay, I'm for law enforcement against Trump. I'm not with law enforcement when it comes, and the judicial system when it comes to Jussie Smollett, when it comes to Bill Cosby. You'll slide it over again when it comes to Trump and say he's guilty before he's even gotten anywhere close to a courtroom. You'll slide it somewhat to the middle, the guilty when it comes to Jussie Smollett, and then you'll slide it to innocent when it comes to Bill Cosby, even though in the court of law he's been found guilty. So those are the type of things that, like I said, I look at, and like I said, when we discuss this is what I have. Because like I said, if you look at what we're about to watch, this is Sean Hannity talking to the accusers or the women who basically said, or the reason why people call Bill Clinton a rapist. And I understand this isn't everyone, right? But I mean, even some people said, he raped Monica Lewinsky. And we know that not to be true, but people will basically spin it so it makes, whatever they said. Now, I'm not going to come out and say I'm saying he is or he isn't. All I'm saying is you got to decide what measuring tool we're going to use to say whether somebody is a rapist or not. If we're going to say if he's guilty in court, he's a rapist. If he's guilty, like he said, in that court of public opinion, he could not be. But anyway, just play the tape. Let's go ahead and start it. And we're not going to go through all of them.
Hannity, here's part 2 of my interview with 3 of Bill Clinton's accusers, Juanita Broaddrick, Paula Jones, and Kathleen Willey. Take a look. Paula, your case resulted in the impeachment of Bill Clinton. You got an $850,000 settlement as a result of your case. Tell us your story. He was the Attorney General then at the time.
No, he was the governor.
I thought he was the governor at the time.
He was the governor at the time. And I was asked to work the governor's quality management conference with another lady there from the office. It was at a hotel. It was called the Excelsior Hotel at the time. The governor was late, and I think he was notoriously late. A lot of times he was known for that. And he came up, and the press, the little local press, was trying to give him an interview and everything, and it was out in front of us, out in front of our table. Right. Well, he was kind of staring at us, staring at me and my coworker a lot. And then he, after all that he went in, and we were out there, and the state police, his security, was there hanging out with us. And later that day, before the end of it, he came over and he said the governor would like to meet with you. I didn't know why, but I was excited, and he said, "It's okay, we do this all the time." Well, that made me feel comfortable. I knew it was the state police. He had a gun. And I thought, well, nothing's going to happen. I mean, they're going to be, I'm going to be safe. So he took me up there to the room. I walked in, and we introduced ourselves, whatever. And
just you, not your friend?
No, I was by myself. No, she didn't really ask to go up there.
Just you?
I was by myself, escorted up to the room with the state police.
who was his security. We did some small talk, and then he started kind of getting a little comfortable and trying to, he said that he loved the way my hair flowed down my back of my clothes, and he liked my curves, and then I'm
that was warning sign number one. That
I didn't know what to do. I mean, this is a governor telling you this stuff.
Where was the security guard at this point?
He was still outside. It was just me and him in the room. And I went on over to try to, I'm thinking, how can I do to distract him? How can I do to distract this situation? And I knew he was sitting out there, knew he had a gun. And so at this point in time, I'm getting a little nervous. So I walked over to the window and I was looking out at the river. I said, oh my, this is a beautiful view from up here at the river. And so he said, yeah, kind of trying to small talk, me. And then he leaned up and he pulled me up towards him, and he was going to try to kiss on me. And so then I tried to distract him again. And I thought, what am I doing? My mind is racing so fast that I don't realize what was even going on. You know what I'm saying? It's like, this is not happening. And I said, well, I may need to be going or something. And next thing you know, he pulled down he sat down, pulled down his pants, his whole everything, and it was exposed. And I said, I'm not that kind of girl, and I need to be getting back to my desk.
And did you walk out then?
Oh, I was trying to, and then when he got his pants up and everything, I was trying to walk over. He rushed over and he grabbed the door facing to where I couldn't get out, and he said, "You're a smart girl. Let's keep this between ourselves." And of course, I didn't have any intentions of really telling anybody. I was scared at that point. I walked out, and the trooper was sitting there with a smirk on his face.
All right, stop it.
Pretty amazing.
Okay, so number one, I'm sorry, she got $850,000, and he basically just exposed himself to her. Not saying it was right, but that's a very expensive flashing. You know what I mean? Like that. I mean, seriously, like. When I hear the story, right, I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, well, when she says things like, oh, well, he's the governor, the situation where like, okay, we already know Brian Kemp is the governor of Georgia, right? So all of a sudden he invites me to the governor's mansion, or he's like, hey, Simon, why don't you come up to my room and, we can discuss some policies or whatnot. And then I get up there and he's like, hey, just want to say, man, you got some very, very nice eyes. I'm gonna be like, yeah, okay, well, I'm out at this point. So whatever you need to do, just send me an email and I'm gone. You see what I'm saying? Like, to me, it's a situation where, once again, I'm not gonna go through the whole victim blaming thing or something like that. But it's like, you got to start to be able to develop those warning signs and saying, well, he was the governor. What does that really mean? I understand he's a powerful person. Don't get me wrong. But if some senator or some person starts rubbing on you or making you feel uncomfortable, you leave. You understand? Like you said, you have police officers outside. Now, what you have to believe is, or what she was kind of almost insinuating is, if something was to happen, that the police would have just basically ignored her pleas for help and basically just said, oh, well, this is the governor, so, we work for him. So just forget about the rape that's going on the other side of the door. I find that very hard to believe. And I had, kind of heard some of the other stories. I heard the other lady's story as well, because they talked about some kissing and things. And like I said, once again, we're going on these, I call them sexual advances, right? Because if someone doesn't, go it's kind of sort of like high school. If you don't go all the way, it's not rape. You understand what I'm saying? If somebody's actually saying Bill Clinton raped him, I know the three women in the room, the first two women that's on the rest of this tape, you can stop sharing this one. None of them, it was no sexual, it was nothing, like I said, sexual that occurred. You understand what I'm saying? There was no sexual contact outside of kissing, a little bit of, groping and things like that. But we're still, that's not rape. You can't say, I was at the club and a dude filled on my booty, he raped me. You understand what I'm saying? It's not appropriate. Don't get me wrong, but it's definitely not rape. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So
I think Bill Clinton has got this label. Now flip it to the other side. Go ahead and get the President Trump one ready, because once again, all we had was a lot of accusations. Remember, and as Jake Tapper will do, in
Jake Tapper one.
Yeah, the Jake Tapper one. As he'll do in this presentation.
President Trump passed
hold on. It ain't hold on, stop it. Yeah, I was about to say it's not shared yet, but there are a lot of women who accuse President Trump as well. And once again, you have this partisan thing where now we're playing he's a rapist, he's a sexual deviant based on which person we're talking about. And it's all partisan because either you believe the women, like you say, do you believe the women who accuse President Trump? More than likely, if you're a conservative or a Trump supporter, you're going to say no. Do you believe the women, in the Bill Clinton case? Most liberals, most Democrats, no. I don't feel like the Bill Clinton thing. I don't think your average. I'm not talking about, or even your far left or your Democratic socialist or somebody who fits on a super liberal or super progressive view Bill Clinton as a rapist. You understand what I'm saying? I think that they would say that how everything happened with Monica Lewinsky was not a good look, but it was consensual between two adults. While we don't condone the behavior, I don't feel like they're calling him a rapist. Would you kind of agree with that?
No. What about what's she called?
We're talking about Juanita Broderick?
Yeah, what about her?
Well, once again, you have to go back to what are we doing? Are we doing what's the standard, right? The reason why, and that's what I'm trying to, one of the discussions I wanted to have. What is the standard that we have? Is the standard conviction in a court of law? Is the standard any sort of let's say any sort of like civil payment? Does that constitute guilt, or is it just because you said this happened? So that once again, it goes back to it goes back to what do you believe? And that's the reason why, like I said, you can add Juanita Broderick on there. She wasn't on one of the videos that I had, but a lot of people say, I guess he raped her. But once again, was he ever convicted of raping her?
No.
And the answer, okay, so then my question is, why do you believe her story? Why do you believe her story then? What makes her story technically more credible than anybody else?
I guess it's because I watched she had an interview on Stephen Crowder's show, and like she had a lot more evidence on a lot of people because she had like her face is messed up. She had pictures. She actually had people who actually saw her right after it happened and stuff like that. That's why I'm on the side of her, but that's kind of like for me, that's kind of the bare minimum if you're gonna have like these allegations that's stretched back for so long. You have to have somebody who was there and at least some kind of show her face is messed up. So
okay, so then I guess it would go back to my follow-up to that will be, if you had the pictures and she's saying she was, the violence that was put on her, right? Then do you believe that it's just, we're going to just say that the Clintons are that powerful that they could basically just have all that evidence in front of them and nothing happened? Because I think that once again kind of goes back to that territory that we spoke of before. I'm not going to say that it's not that way. What I will say is that maybe, I mean, we do know people do get away with crimes. But what I'm saying is, and that's what I'm saying, like, let's establish a baseline. And if we establish a baseline in society, we can avoid some of these complicated and what I call very biased conversations. And we don't have to worry about making the victim into a person who is not necessarily, you automatically judge to judgment. I mean, dang, I blew that all the way up. Just to judgment. I just said judgment right there. But anyway, you rush to judgment, right? For example, let's take Kavanaugh. If we as a society say this is what we're going to do. Now, I understand we have our opinions. We do an opinion show, so it's fine. We're going to get out here and talk about it. But as far as calling somebody out their name, calling Kavanaugh a rapist, calling him a sexual deviant, calling him whatever you want to say, alcoholic, whatever the case may be, we're going to make the standard the court of law. if someone is convicted in the court of law, have at it. If somebody calls Bill Cosby a racist, they're entitled to do that. You can tell you why Bill Cosby was convicted in front of a jury of his peers of, sexual assault. It's a done deal.
I will admit that these rape cases and stuff like this, and it's like, especially like the Jussie Smollett stuff, it's kind of hard to know what's true or not, because it's like a lot of it's circumstantial, you know.
It is, and we're gonna get to some of the other faces that we saw, but I think the two presidents are the kind of the glaring people that are on this list. But I want you to actually, can you kind of skip ahead in the Jake Tapper piece, because I want you to kind of skip where he kind of just outlines the various women who, while he was running as candidate, Trump came out against him, and it's like, you'll keep going. Yeah, right there. Okay, now go back right. Okay, yeah, right there, and start it from right there.
These women, at least 12 women,
Dang.
who have brought forward claims on the record about President Trump's past behavior, alleging actions ranging from sexual harassment to sexual misconduct to, in some cases, sexual assault, spanning the 1980s to the 2000s. Jessica Drake said in a press conference that Donald Trump hugged her, kissed her without consent, and offered her money to go out with them. Summer Zervos, a contestant on The Apprentice, accused President Trump of harassing her on multiple occasions, including kissing her, quote, very aggressively and placing his hand on her chest without her consent. Jessica Leeds told the New York Times that during a flight he sat next to her.
All right, stop. Now, this is the only one that kind of looks suspect to me, because if you look at all the rest of the women, they're all around the same age, and she's the only one that's technically in Trump's area code as far as age. But anywho, I'm not gonna say her story is any less credible, but I do like, I love patterns. You know what I mean? I do like patterns. So I want you to kind of look at the pictures and look at kind of where some of these women are. And then, like I said, the rest of them look like beauty contestants. But anyway, I digress. Continue. You started back up.
And began to grab her breasts and put his hands up her skirt. Mindy McGillivray told the Washington Post that Trump groped her at Mar-a-Lago. Quote, I was startled. I jumped, she said. Rachel Crooks, who worked in the Trump Tower, told the New York Times that Trump kissed her on the cheeks and her mouth without consent. People magazine, Natasha Stoynoff claims Donald Trump pushed her against a wall and forced his tongue down her throat. A former Miss Utah, Temple Taggart, claims Mr. Trump gave her a non-consensual embrace and kissed her on the lips during a pageant rehearsal against her wishes, and repeated the behavior later at a Trump Tower meeting. Kristen Anderson says in a crowded Manhattan club, Donald Trump reached up her miniskirt and touched her genitals through her underwear. Kathy Heller claims that President Trump forcibly kissed her at a Mother's Day brunch at Mar-a-Lago. Former Miss Finland, Nini Laaksonen, said Mr. Trump grabbed her buttocks before a joint appearance on The Late Show. Karina Virginia said in a press conference that President Trump touched the side of her breasts before allegedly asking, don't you know who I am? And Jill Harth says Mr. Trump made unwanted sexual advances toward her, including groping her under her skirt on 2 different occasions. Now, the Trump campaign issued statements denying the claims, and of course, then candidate.
Okay, so right there you have 12 accusers. Now, nobody there has accused President Trump of rape. Let's make sure that's, we heard a lot of kissing, a lot of unwanted contact. We heard a lot of, unwanted advances. We heard a lot of, groping, things of that, fondling, things of that nature. But we didn't hear anything of he forced himself on any of these women, like penetration. You know what I mean? Like, it's still not rape. Yeah. But I still heard people refer to President Trump as a racist. You understand what I'm saying? So in one case, we have the president of the United States who has 12 accusers against him. Now, once again, these are just allegations, but once again, because we have zero standard, it's kind of sort of like we don't know how to deal with these things in a non-biased way. I don't believe the majority of the women now, and I can admit that it's because I'm probably biased toward the president. But at the same time, it's a situation for me where I'm not the type either, but I don't call Bill Clinton a rapist either. Because once again, my standard is just the court of law. Even though I still call OJ a murderer, but I understand he wasn't found guilty. But once again, I kind of feel like that was just one of those obvious things. So once again, we do have bias, and sometimes we go against them, but I think we need to at least try to move ourselves in a direction towards that. Okay, so you can stop sharing that. And I want you to bring back up the picture again that I posted on IG, because I think it brings up a very a valid point, and it brings up a very big issue that we have in our country right now. A lot of people want to talk about the shooter, or not even the shooter. He's not a shooter. They want to talk about the Coast Guard person, who was planning an attack. Why? Because it's an obvious knock at Trump supporters. We can have the conversation of white terrorism, and this is what real terrorists look like, because that's a conversation that a lot of people want to have about, like white, the quote unquote the white shooter. That's one of these topics that people want to discuss. So if you look at the picture, I'm just going to go through kind of the rest of them, and then we'll wrap things up. The first one. So like I said, we obviously know the presidents and how they go. There's a lot of bias when it comes to those two men at the top. I've heard both of them called rapists. I've heard both of them called, basically like they don't like women. They're not respectful of women, XYZ. But I'll hear arguments for both of them depending on, which side of the aisle you're on. Okay, now below there, I have two people, which is Robert Downey Jr. and Sarah Silverman. Now, we already talked about the quote unquote the Gucci scandal, right? So if you look at Robert Downey Jr., which was something that I think he was nominated for an Academy Award for this role he played, but any way you look at it, there's no way to say he's not in blackface, right? Like, isn't that the epitome of blackface, what Robert Downey Jr. is doing right there?
Yep, it is.
And while I think it was hilarious, and see, my whole thing is I'm not going, and people say, oh, that's a false equivalency. No, not really. You got to be able to set a standard and say, I don't want to see any white person ever in black makeup, pretending to be a black person with anything. And I mean, he's even got the hair and everything. You understand what I'm saying? So it's a situation for me where I'm like, well, how is this not blackface? Because to me, it was a brilliant performance. It was funny. I would never see it. I wouldn't view it like that, right? But the problem to me is I think that we have these different types of standards, and we don't have a standard that just says no blackface or any imitation of black people, period, is a problem. Because even if it's for a comedies, I can hear somebody coming out and saying, that role Robert Downey Jr. played could have went to a black actor. I mean, we have heard that before, it's kind of sort of like the old Simpsons and the Apu thing, right? There's a white actor who does the voice for Apu, who is apparently, I believe, either Pakistani or Indian, but it's not a Indian or a Pakistani actor doing the voice. So next to him, a lot of people like to point out Sarah Silverman, because everybody knows Sarah Silverman is an outspoken liberal. They'll point out, oh, well, the only reason why she gets away with this is because she's a liberal, and liberals can get away with anything. Once again, depending on how you view it. Now, to me, you could say, well, one is in a demeaning manner, the other is for a comedic purpose. However you want to look at it, either way, it's blackface, both of them. So I believe that, like I said, we need to start to try to shift the conversation, and basically, like I said, let's develop a baseline for these things. Because if we're going to say blackface can never be acceptable, ever, it can never be acceptable ever, then we got to come down on Robert Downey Jr. as well, even though we thought, and I agree with the Academy on this one, that was an Academy Award-winning performance. We got to say, yeah, it was great and everything. You did a great job portraying a black man, but we got to come at you because you did blackface. You see what I'm saying? Like we got to be able to set standards so this way we don't overreact. So this way we can basically keep everything in front of us, and we can't come back and say, because what I'm hearing a lot more of, and you'll agree or disagree, is I'm hearing a lot of, if it was a blank, then it would be this. If it was a Republican, then blah, blah, blah. If it was a white man, blah, 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 blah. If it was a black man, blah, 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 blah. Instead of just being whatever the case may be, being right or wrong. Same thing goes with the next two people. You got Ben Roethlisberger, high profile athlete. You have Kobe Bryant. Some people, now if you don't remember, Ben Roethlisberger was accused, I believe, of either sexually assaulting or fondling some girl in the bathroom in Georgia. At some point in time, he was never arrested or whatever the case may be. And, you know, but it was once again that accusation out there. And somebody could say, well, he was never even charged with it, right? That's one of the things that you can say, but it still goes back to that bias that you have. Because Kobe Bryant, what happened with Kobe and the whole the Colorado rape thing was completely different. Some people still identify Kobe as a rapist, even though he has these rape allegations. It didn't really hurt his career. It hasn't hurted what he's doing now. It hasn't even hurt his after career. And to me, it almost seems forgotten in both cases because their greatness on their respective sport kind of made people forget about the Kobe Bryant rape case. Ben Roethlisberger having a couple of Super Bowls, being the quarterback of one of the most popular teams in the country, you kind of forget about that, right? That's two of the ones that I think are kind of obvious. Do you feel like people still look at Kobe Bryant or as an accused rapist? Don't you feel like that kind of makes them lose some credibility? If you're an accused rapist, don't you feel like that should make their kind of like their shine kind of drop a little bit? You know what I mean? Like if somebody gets accused of rape, it's kind of hard to just keep going on with life after that. You know what I mean? Like that's a big deal.
It is.
But
it ruins people's lives.
It ruins people's lives. It ruins the victim. It ruins the either the potential person who's being accused of it, and you know everything else that's around it. So, like I said, it's a very it's just a very difficult thing to kind of go through. Yeah. The next two people, Robert Byrd. Okay, now it's once again, I'm gonna slide that scale to Trump. I was talking to a lady the other day who told me that we have a KKK member in the White House. And I don't think there's any evidence to ever point to Trump actually being a card-carrying member of the Ku Klux Klan. But we have somebody like Senator Robert Byrd, who we know, who is admittedly a member of the Ku Klux Klan, former member of the Ku Klux Klan. He was a Democrat, and this is somebody who Obama spoke at his funeral and said, had good things to say about him. Hillary Clinton spoke at his funeral and had good things to say about him. This is somebody who we know there is no quote unquote fake news. There is no, I'm just saying it because no. We know he was a member of the KKK. But you know what people will say? Instead of just basically saying, hey, look, being a member of the KKK is not a good thing, they'll say, oh, it's a, he's a Democrat. So they'll use it as a shot at the Democrats, right? Oh, what about Robert Byrd? This. It's not just the KKK is a racist organization and you shouldn't want to be in it, right? It's Robert Byrd is a Democrat type thing. You understand what I'm saying? You see like the difference between just condemning the organization, but you only condemn the organization because it gives you a chance to have, quote unquote, the upper hand on Democrats. All right. Then next to him, right, we have David Duke. Now, when David Duke was in Congress, he was another Democrat. He was a Democratic congressman from Louisiana. And he was the guy in the movie Black Klansman, who basically the center or the focus of the movie was like the center of the investigation. It was on David Duke. And ironically, the thing that you can kind of say that was missed about that from the movie is they don't really talk about the fact that he was a Democrat. They basically go to now I think he's come out as saying he's like he supports Republican candidates, but when he actually served in Congress, he was a Democrat. So once again, it comes back to when he was in the KKK, which side was he on? You see what I'm saying? And then it goes, Well, now that he's a Republican, guess what? It's like, oh, well, he's a Republican now, and you know he was a member of the KKK, so this is the reason, blah, blah, blah. You know, people use David Duke as a
boogeyman.
Well, not as a boogeyman, but they'll use him as like a slight towards Republicans, or they'll use him as a slight towards Trump and say, oh, look, David Duke supported President Trump, right? But you ignore that the fact that when he was he's still like on that side, right? But it's like it only applies when it wants to make the point that you want to make, instead of, like I said, just being, he worked for an organization that shouldn't even exist in this country. And you know, it's just a bad thing. It doesn't matter if he was a Democrat or a Republican. Now you can use that to make whatever point you want to, but it shouldn't matter which side of the aisle he was on. And if the only thing you're concerned about is trying to make sure all the open Klan members are Democrats and make sure all the open Klan members are Republicans so you can make some sort of overarching point, I think you're missing the point. And the point should be, that shouldn't be the focus. The focus to me, and just like I said, it's just my opinion, should be, you have a problem with the organization, call the organization out. Stop focusing on whether or not the person's a Democrat or a Republican, because I know that's what a lot of these people will do. They'll come out and they'll say, well, this person X did something. Oh, well, you know what? Like with the Republican softball shooting. He's a Bernie supporter, right? That was one of the first things that came out of it. Not the fact that he shot up a whole base. I mean, he shot up a softball field, which is ridiculous. It was, oh, he's a Bernie supporter. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it shouldn't matter what somebody is. Like people like to say, oh, such and such they're crazy, so they represent the whole side. But it's crazy people on both sides. Like this person targeting all these people, like that's probably somebody else who's targeting Republicans. Like I hate when they like try to make it like one side is worse than the other, but they're the same.
Correct. And I feel like there are problems that exist within both sides, and the problems that exist within both sides need to be called out. And I don't feel like you should make any sort of, you shouldn't make any sort of, you shouldn't make any concessions just because they're on your side. If it comes out on your side, hey, you got to take that as it is. But I noticed, like I said, it's a lot of that going on. I don't care who the person voted for. If they were going to try to do a mass shooting, it doesn't matter when those, like I said, when those bullets start flying, are you really going to be like, oh, hey, it's a crazy guy shooting. Hey, he's got a MAGA hat on. You're going to stand up and be like, oh, I voted for Trump, so don't shoot me. You see what I'm saying? Like it's a dumb way to kind of approach things. And finally on there, we got R. Kelly versus we got Michael Jackson. Now, of course, R. Kelly is in the news now because, of course, we had to survive an R. Kelly tape. He turned himself in. He's in jail. He's been accused of 10 counts of sexual assault and sexual misconduct. And with all that being said, R. Kelly gets the brand, if you will, of being a rapist, of being a child molester, of all these different things. And I think that's, like I said, a big problem. You see what I'm saying? The problem is that, like I say, when I say big problem, don't let me make it seem like that, but it's the bias that it's once again, up until this point, even now, he still hasn't been convicted of anything. And people like to say, well, where there's smoke, there's fire. So you can call him a sexual deviant. They've taken his music off the radio. They've done all that. And I point to, okay, well, what about Michael Jackson? Can't we say the same thing about all those little boys that were apparently at him, the ones who have accused him of sexually molesting them? And some people say, well, that was about the money, XYZ. Once again, we can have that argument, right? We can have that discussion and say, okay, well, you believe people were trying to get money out of Michael Jackson. That's the reason why it's different. But I still go back to that once again, what is going to be our baseline for guilt? You see what I'm saying? Michael, they have, you notice, right now, and it's funny because it's not funny, but if a radio station plays Step in the Name of Love right now, right? R. Kelly song. If they played that, I feel like people would come out and be like, oh, I can't believe that radio station played that song. Right?
That make no sense.
But you can hear any Michael Jackson song, any Jackson 5 song, And you never for a second think, oh man, what about all those little boys that he molested? You see what I'm saying? Like that once again goes back to the it doesn't have the same Duncan. It doesn't have the I'm watching the game, obviously, but it doesn't have the same it doesn't have the same stink to it. You know what I mean? Yeah. The Michael go ahead.
Nobody likes to talk about that. What happened with Michael Jackson?
I think go ahead.
And every time I think of Michael Jackson, it's always in the back of my mind, you know?
Correct. The same thing, and I could have put somebody else on there, but I kind of want to do like the messing with young kids narrative. But what about Chris Brown? He beat on Rihanna, right? Yeah. But he's managed to have his career come all the way back after he was accused of, we saw the pictures of Rihanna. It's no point of even, it's nothing really to even really discuss when it comes to Rihanna. You know what I mean? We know that he beat on Rihanna.
Didn't he even admit it?
I mean, he went to jail for it.
Yeah.
He was accused guilty, but an accused woman beater, just because, he can dance, he can sing, women like the way he looks, all these different things, you kind of sort of just forget, oh yeah, he was actually accused of assaulting a woman. And once again, it goes back to that bias. And for some people, you can hear a Chris Brown song and you don't even think about him beating on Rihanna like that.
You don't.
But you're perfectly fine with them boycotting R. Kelly. And like I said, up until this point, R. Kelly has been convicted of nothing. You can say, well, that was him in the video. You can say X, Y, and Z. You can use it however you want to. But what I will say is, that's just my main point. I hope one day in this country we can actually start to gravitate towards, people not being, not being so biased. You understand what I'm saying? Like we can get to a point. I was looking at a YouTube comment, and I guess when I was talking about Robert Downey Jr., somebody said he was a dude playing a dude dressed as another dude, and that was from Tropic Thunder. You know what I mean? Talking about Robert Downey Jr. But once again, the fact that we can laugh about that, and I understand you can say, well, it's not in an insulting manner, so I'm not going to be insulted by it, and I can fully understand that. I just think that I don't want to say it's an all or nothing with some of these things, but I feel like if we can start off with the court system and we say, I'm going to use the court system as my baseline, I think we'll be better off as a society. Even though we can always have our opinions, I think it's very, it's a rush to judgment to go ahead and automatically remove all these people from the radio, to basically want, I mean, like R. Kelly, I think it's sad that he doesn't have $100,000 to get himself out of jail.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This man is one of the highest selling albums, all the songs he wrote for other people. And you trying to tell me like he doesn't have any money? He doesn't have $100,000? Like they started to GoFundMe. Not saying like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not even trying to have sympathy for R. Kelly when I say I feel sorry for him. I'm sitting there thinking like this is that other side of like where are you at in your life? You understand what I'm saying? So we're going to see how they all play out. A lot of people are coming out now and starting to say that they're not believing the police as much now because why did the brothers wait until the 47th hour? They were going to be held for 48 hours, but they waited to the 47th hour to basically turn on Jussie Smollett. So I think he's starting to gain some traction amongst some people that might believe he might be leaning more towards innocent. R. Kelly, we're going to wait and see what happens with him. I didn't even talk about Robert Kraft because to me, I mean, come on, man, he's a rich guy.
Yeah.
Who, he paid. Apparently, I found out it was he paid for a threesome with two girls, and I'm like, man, honestly, I'm gonna be honest with you. In the Robert Kraft situation, I don't care. I don't care. People say, oh, well, you don't care about human trafficking. I'm not talking about human trafficking side of what I'm talking about. This man is rich beyond his means, and I'm pretty sure he could have found some willing participants with all that money he has to do whatever he wants to do. But I don't know. We could have a conversation on prostitution. I'm definitely not going to have it tonight. But you know, it's to me, I don't care. That man's 70 years old. He's a widower. If you know he wanted to, you know, have him a little fun, and it was all consensual, and they're not quote unquote sex slaves or whatever the case may be, then you know, so be it. I'm not gonna sit there and, you know, call this man all out of his name, make him seem like he's a sexual deviant because of what's going on with him. I'm just saying, you know, it is what it is. And once again, what is going to be the you know, what is going to be our baseline for even things like that? Because if you think about that whole charge, it's just, to me, like I said, I mean, you can make a big story because of who it is, but to me, it's a nothing story. We're talking about soliciting prostitution in 2019, and people are trying to make it seem like it's a big story when you go in any NBA locker room and you start talking about prostitutes, everyone would probably start looking towards the wall like, oh, I don't know. You know, they would say, I don't know what you're talking about. But I mean, it's a pretty common thing, you know, for a lot of these players to seek professional help. But like I said, I'm not getting into prostitution tonight. I'm not going to go on no big deep thing yet. Like I said, my voice is already tired. Once again, BJ, man, I appreciate you coming to assist with the show. Right now, I would like to make a somewhat of an announcement. I am in the works of getting something set up for next year. I'm going to attempt, now the key word is attempt, a kind of sort of like an HBCU tour next year, where I plan on going to at least 5 campuses to kind of have these kind of difficult discussions. So right now, I'm looking, like I said, I want to do probably one school from each conference that's represented in historically Black conferences. So that's going to be the MEAC, the SWAC, the CIAA, and the SIAC. So I'm going to look at least making sure each one of the schools is represented, that is a representative of each one of those conferences, and maybe try to do anywhere from a 5 to an 8 college tour. We basically just open up the floor. We can discuss politics. We can discuss a lot of different things, but I'm actually trying to start reaching out, getting some contacts. So, you know, if anybody has any contacts at any one of these schools who could assist, if you could contact us on 50 Shades of Red podcast at IG, because like I said, we're definitely trying to put this on. We're not, you know, yeah, it would be nice if we're going to be looking for some sponsors as well to kind of help assist with some of the costs that'll be involved in it. But it's not like we need the Black college Republicans to go ahead and try to, you know, pay us to come or do something like that. You know, I'm looking at getting a couple of people to come with me as well to kind of be our support group and actually, you know, do some things as well. But we're definitely trying to expand this conversation, because if you notice, at least in that first CNN clip that we saw, she seemed like the odd person out. The young lady who was actually trying to say all MAGA supporters are bad. And I'm not saying that that's how it's supposed to be, but I feel like it's better when you don't feel comfortable saying whatever you can say and it's unchallenged. And I think that's where we're not starting to get there. We're there now. You're too comfortable saying things because you believe that the crowd that you're speaking to agrees with you. So I believe that it's better to pose questions, accept questions. Let's open up this conversation so that, number one, these young kids, like I remember I was watching the Candace Owen at Dillard University in New Orleans. And one thing that I watched and I said, she didn't, and it's not a knock at Candace Owens, but it is. Explain to them what you're selling. Explain to them what we believe in. Explain to them why you think big government is bad. Explain to them why giving the government more of our tax money probably won't end up getting the desired effect because of how the government mismanages our money. Start to explain some of the, the real issues that we can affect from a congressional standpoint, and maybe kind of start to stay away from some of the Supreme Court type stuff and start to get kids to open their minds, because in college, that's where kids are going to be the most, you would think, the most receptive to some of these things. So like I said, we'll be back next week. I should have somebody on next week to try to have a little bit of a back and forth discussion. I'm actually gonna get somebody who I completely don't agree with, so it shouldn't be like a happy-go-lucky. We all agree, and we all hold hands and sing Kumbaya show next week. So, like I said, I want to say I appreciate, man, all the help and everything that you've been doing to assist with the show. Hopefully, if I can get this tour together, man, I would love to have you, come along with me. I think it would, first of all, it's gonna be fun. Second of all, I think it would just be a good thing to see. We go to the area where we say we want to have this discussion with Black people. It's not anything to anybody else, but if you want to reach across the aisle, if you want to say, hey, we don't like this 95% Blacks voting Democrat thing, let's at least get you to open your mind. If you're not going to open your mind, let's at least if we have a discussion about what you're voting for. You know what I mean? Some of the policies and things that are starting to come in. So hopefully I can start developing some contacts and get this thing started, because I would like to start doing it, in the fall for next year. So until next Monday, this has been the Aftermath with Saul G. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Please remember, like, subscribe on YouTube, and we'll see you again next Monday. Everybody be blessed. Thank you.
Y'all have a good night.